What's up everyone, Mitchell Saltzman here once again, and this time I wanted to spend some time answering your questions regarding Elden Ring. I made a tweet over the weekend asking people to send me all of their Elden Ring questions, and now I'm going to try to answer as many of them as I can to the best of my ability, while also demonstrating what I'm talking about within the game. So, let's get started. Alright, first question. Do you feel like you have to grind to progress? I don't mean learning boss or enemy patterns, etc., but actually grind for souls in order to level up and realistically be able to win fights. Super excited for your preview/review, Mitch. Definitely the right man for the job at IGN. Oh, thank you so much. That's so nice of you to say. So first, I gotta explain something about me. I hate grinding. It's one of the reasons why I feel like I'm turned off of a lot of JRPGs that require you to grind in order to withstand a lot of the enemies or the bosses that will just like one hit kill you. So I actively avoid grinding whenever I play a From Software action RPG. So to that point, no, I don't think that you have to grind in Elden Ring, or at least I didn't. That said, one of the things I really like about From Software's action RPGs is that grinding is an option. These games really are as hard as you decide to make them. If you decide to spend the time grinding, there are definitely spots where you can grind. They're called runes. Runes is basically the souls of the game. There are definitely spots where it's good to grind runes, and you can get stones from there also to upgrade your weapons. You can farm crafting materials so you can craft better items and stuff. So the option is certainly there to grind, but I never felt like it was a requirement in order to deal with certain bosses. Certainly it would have helped. It would have made things easier if I did more damage to bosses, but I managed to get through it without grinding anything. So I think I got through the last boss at like level 14 or 15, which to me felt low. So to answer your question, no, it's not required, but it would definitely help. Does the magic seem overpowered, and how does riding the horse feel? I.e., is horse riding more like Witcher 3 or Ghost of Tsushima? So for the first thing, what I'll say is that it doesn't feel like Demon Souls level of overpoweredness in terms of magic, where I would tell people, if you want an easy mode in Demon Souls, pick a magic class. I think there's three things to take note of in terms of the enemies and bosses of Elden Ring when it comes to magic. One, casting spells takes a very long time, especially when you're casting the really powerful spells. Two, a lot of enemies and bosses are hyper aggressive, so it's very hard to get that separation of space that you need in order to cast a spell that takes a really long time to cast. And number three, most enemies and bosses can hit you from a football field away. So I think those three things really keep magic in check. That said, magic hits like a truck. But in addition to that, there's also this Ash of War that you can get called Glint Sword Arch, which is very much like the homing soul mass spells from other Dark Souls games. It creates 4 floating swords that go over your head. They automatically lock on to whatever enemy appears, and it does a lot of damage. The only bummer about it is that if it runs into a wall or something as you're casting it, then the swords go away. But that's a really good spell because it's a quick cast, it goes automatically, and you can kind of just keep on casting and keep running away. So is it overpowered? I would say no, but it is very strong. It's also worth noting that a lot of the really crazy spells that you see in the trailer aren't in the closed test, or at the very least I haven't found them. Also, I think it's worth keeping in mind that there are going to be areas in this game where magic is going to be very strong, and there are going to be areas where magic is going to be very weak because you're going to be encountering enemies that are going to be resistant to magic. So, to answer the question, no, I don't think magic is going to be overpowered, but it is very strong, and it's still a little early to really say that definitively because we haven't really seen the really powerful spells that you're going to eventually get. Oh, and then I forgot the second part of your question. How does riding the horse feel, i.e., is horse riding more like The Witcher 3 or Ghost of Tsushima? I'm gonna be honest, I haven't played Witcher 3 in a long enough time to really know what that comparison is that you're saying between Witcher 3 and Ghost of Tsushima. I will say, riding the horse in Elden Ring is fine. It's not, it's not trying to emulate what real horseback riding is like. Obviously, you have a double jump on this horse. There's a very simple sprint that you can use to increase your speed, and yeah, it does its job. Is probably the best thing I can really say about it. Fighting on horseback is a little awkward. It takes away, you know, the strong attack and heavy attack. It just makes it so that you have one attack on the left side, one attack on the right side. You have to time it correctly. Every weapon has a different timing that you have to learn. So, you know, there's definitely nuance to it. How guided is the gameplay experience compared to the other Soul games? So, it's definitely more guided, but I don't think that's a bad thing in this case. Because of the fact that it is so much more open compared to the other Soul games, it's a lot harder for people to really find the mainline path and just go through that mainline path that they want to. So when you get to a site of grace, you'll see a little bit of light that kind of lightly guides you to the next destination that you want to go to if you want to follow the mainline path. You don't have to follow it. There's nothing that's causing you to go down that path if you don't want to. But there is that guiding light that is persistent throughout the entire game. I think one other thing that I want to shout out with regards to Elden Ring and its guidance, so to speak, is that this game does a better job of any other From Software game that I can think of when it comes to reminding players about its mechanics. So if you go to your inventory and you scroll all the way over to the right, you get this little tab of info. And basically it allows you to revisit tooltips that have already come up that you might have accidentally, you know, clicked through because you just wanted to get through the game. So that's really helpful. And then in addition to that, you can also press the touchpad whenever you're on a specific screen, and you can bring up the original tooltip that came up when you first got to it. So it's more guided than other games in the series, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's absolutely a positive step forward for the franchise. This may be a stupid question, but can you save as per Skyrim, or is progress only saved after a checkpoint like in Demon's Souls? Not a stupid question, but no, you cannot save like you can in Skyrim. I think it kind of goes against the nature of these games if you're able to save and load right before a boss, especially because the game is by design meant to be punishing upon death. You can't, you know, just save scum to avoid that situation. Does the open world content feel like filler? Enemies placed randomly in the world, too much empty space with nothing interesting to do. I am afraid that the new open world formula can end up hurting the game. Thanks in advance. No, I actually don't think so. I think the open world content in this game is actually really, really good. And of course, this is all going by just the closed network test. I haven't seen anything beyond it. I think in a lot of really smart ways, the open world content in Elden Ring is very much inspired by Breath of the Wild. And when I say that, I mean that the open world points of interest aren't just copied and pasted things that you see over and over again in different spots of the world. They are always unique and interesting events, and even though there might not always be a worthwhile reward, they're always just a really cool pocket of something interesting happening. You might be roaming around and all of a sudden you'll see a giant colossus that rises up from the ground. You might go to another area and there will be a ton of jellyfish that you've never seen before in any other place. Or you'll just go to another area and you'll see a giant gathering of trolls that you've never seen in any other area. And that doesn't even take into consideration the dungeons, which are very much like Elden Ring's version of the shrines from Breath of the Wild, in that they each have their own self-contained combat encounter, sometimes with a boss, always with a worthwhile reward, and they're all themed very differently. So no, I absolutely don't feel like the open world content feels like filler. I think it's always worthwhile. It's always interesting to seek out, and the rewards that you get for exploring are very, very good. So yeah, I actually think that From Software is nailing the open world design so far in Elden Ring. How is the difficulty scaling in the open world? Are there areas that you can wander into early on that you probably need to come back to when you're at a higher level, similar to the catacombs in Dark Souls 1, or can most people tackle areas in any order and do all right? So to answer this question, I have to first, remind people this is just a closed test. There are invisible walls that are preventing you from going too far out. Everything is very self-contained and very planned within this play space, so to speak. So when I say that wasn't an issue at all, just keep in mind, I don't know if that's going to be an issue in the full game. But in this closed test, There was no aspect of difficulty scaling at all. Every area had a different set of enemies that weren't any more difficult than any of the other areas. They were just different. So you'd go to an area, you'd find skeletons that were easy to bring down, but they would resurrect, much like the catacombs in Dark Souls 1. In another area, you would find these dragon-like enemies that ultimately would go down pretty easily, but if you didn't have a ranged weapon, they might be a little harder to deal with. So there was no area of the demo where I felt like I was out of my depth because I was too low of a level. You could really go in any direction right from the start and deal with whatever you had in that area. I hope they keep it like this though. I think it's really awesome that you can really go in any direction right from the start and carve your own path through the game. What I imagine is going to happen is, this first area is Limgrave. Limgrave is going to be its own kind of almost self-contained area where you're going to start the game, you're not going to be able to move beyond it because of not having an item that you probably get from the Legacy Dungeon boss. And then once you get that, you're going to go into another area that's going to be its own kind of self-contained area with its own, recommended level. And from there, it's just going to keep on building until you get to each new area of the game. So that's all just speculation, but to answer your question, in the network test, no, you don't have to worry about level scaling. You can go wherever you want. There's no kind of thing like the catacombs from Dark Souls 1, where you go in an area and you just get one-shotted by enemies. How does the level of challenge you've experienced so far stack up to prior FromSoft games? Have you fought any bosses? And if so, how tough were they? I have fought so many bosses. It is unbelievable how many bosses are packed within this closed network test. As far as the level of challenge goes, and this is a question that I got a bunch of times, people really want to know how hard Elden Ring is. It's a hard game, guys. I think it's about on par with what I would expect from software. I definitely stubbornly struggled against a lot of the bosses because of the fact that, like I mentioned before, I don't like to grind. I don't like to summon people for help. Whenever I play a Souls game, it's always my personal value to be able to beat a boss one-on-one, not rely on summons, not rely on cheap tactics that break the encounter. And so, sticking to those values, I struggled. There were a couple bosses that took me upwards of 30-40 minutes to beat. That said, what is true about Elden Ring and what is true about all the other Souls games is that there are lifelines that you basically have. You could summon help. You could grind and level yourself up to where you can make many more mistakes than normally you could. You could leave and go to another area and come back when you have better gear or a better Ash of War or a better itemized summon that you can use. So there's all kinds of ways to navigate around the difficulty of Elden Ring to bring it down to whatever level you feel comfortable with. So it's kind of a tough question to answer in terms of like how difficult it is. Once again, this is a network test, so things are going to be different than the full game. But one of the things that I think is notable about Elden Ring is that it gives you this this guard counter ability that just almost completely trivializes the battles against these smaller rank and file soldiers that only attack you once and can recoil after your shield. But yeah, basically what happens is you block an attack, you hit the strong attack button right after it, and even if this didn't kill them in one hit, it would knock away their shield and break their stance, which would put them in a position of a critical attack. So that move is just really good for dealing with these guys. It's not good at dealing with bigger enemies and more monstrous enemies that attack you a lot and don't recoil when they get blocked by a shield, but just something to keep in mind. So to answer the question of how hard is Elden Ring, I feel like it's pretty on par with the rest of the Souls games. I don't think any of the Souls games really have a huge disparity in how much harder they are from each other, and this kind of just feels like on the same level. I think like the other games from Software, a lot of the difficulty in Elden Ring is going to be learning how to play Elden Ring. It's going to be learning when to use the guard counter, learning when to roll, learning when to block, learning when to try to parry,